At 4:36 a.m. on August 27, 2025, calm Caribbean waters erupted into chaos. Dozens of radar blips appeared on the screens of USS Mason DDG-87, forming the shape of a multi-million-dollar armada racing north. 7 motherships, 12 go-fast boats, and a stealth semi-submersible carried over 50,000 pounds of cocaine and fentanyl, a cargo worth more than $320 million. Within minutes, U.S. Navy destroyers, P-8 Poseidons, and MH-60R Seahawks locked targets across 2 million square miles of ocean. What followed was not a chase, but a war at sea, missiles, drones, and heavy guns turning the Caribbean dawn into fire and thunder. But how far would this Navy go to stop a fleet that powerful? And when the ocean becomes the new battlefield, who truly controls the waves? Stay with us, hit subscribe, and tell us, where in the world are you watching this from? At exactly 4:36 a.m., the Caribbean dawn broke with a warning. Inside the Combat Information Center of USS Mason DDG-87, radar screens flashed red. 7 motherships were moving north in formation. 12 go-fast boats powered by triple Yamaha 425 horsepower engines closed in at 45 knots. A Colombian-built semi-submersible rose through the haze, barely visible above the waves. Intelligence confirmed the cargo, more than 50,000 pounds of cocaine and fentanyl. Street value over $320 million. Enough poison to erase an entire state from within. Above them, a P-8A Poseidon patrol aircraft scanned the sea. It's an APY-10 radar painted faint wakes across the surface like veins under human skin. 2 MQ-9 Reaper drones locked infrared eyes on the convoy. On the destroyer's bridge, the Aegis SPY-1D array turned from missile defense to manhunt, tracking fiberglass hulls the size of delivery trucks. Across 2 million square miles of ocean, the U.S. Navy moved like a living machine of steel and precision. This was not law enforcement anymore. It was a maritime chess played at dawn, every move measured in knots, miles, and lives. If cartels can send an armada worth hundreds of millions, how far should the Navy go to stop them? What would you risk to keep those waters clean? At exactly 5:12 a.m., the stillness of the vast water was broken. 2 Coast Guard cutters, the USCGC Bertholf and the USCGC James, moved in from opposite corners. Their radar operators tracked the targets steaming north at 46 knots. The orders from the USS Mason DDG-87 were clear: intercept and warn. In the morning mist, the ARHIB rescue teams plunged into the waves, engines roaring against the current. The command to stop rang out over the loudspeakers. The only answer was to accelerate. 1 speedboat jerked to one side, smoke billowing from its exhaust like a dragon's breath. Immediately afterward, a salvo of 7.62 millimeter rounds sliced through the sea, tearing it to shreds. The gunners on the Bertholf responded with M2 Browning heavy machine guns, targeting the outboard motors. Helicopters took off from the destroyer deck. 2 MH-60R Seahawks armed with GAU-17 miniguns and M240 machine guns mounted on the doors. The tracer bullets were accurate and cold. Within minutes, a gangboat had stalled. Its propeller shattered. This was no longer a chase. It was a duel between billion-dollar systems and fiberglass daredevils. Laws gave way to survival, and the line between police work and war blurred in the rhyme. When a drug dealer fired first, was it still considered crime or combat? At exactly 5:47 a.m., the first rocket cut the sky like a flare. The weapon was a salvaged RPG-7, and it passed within 20 feet of an MH-60R Seahawk before detonating in the water, throwing spray and flame into the air. Combat alarms screamed through USS Mason DDG-87. Radar lit up with 20 separate contacts spread across a 10-mile sector. The Aegis SPY-1D array computed intercepts faster than any human heartbeat. The ship moved from patrol posture to engagement posture in less than 30 seconds. Orders were blunt and immediate. Engage to disable and protect the force. 2 MH-60R Seahawks banked into wind with GAU-17 miniguns spinning at 6,000 rounds per minute. Door gunners poured tracer into wake lines. Tracer stitched the sea and found hulls. Fiberglass splintered. Outboards burst into flame. Black smoke curled into the low clouds. One go-fast boat rolled over and its crew hit the water. Survivors scrambled for flotation in a churn of diesel and debris. The smugglers answered with ferocity. An escort launched short bursts from a 12.7mm heavy machine gun at a Coast Guard cutter. Rounds fell short, but close enough to rattle plate and nerve. A new alarm chimed. A heat signature rose fast from the convoy rear, and the bridge read it as a possible SA-7-style MANPAD. Infrared warning tones screamed. The destroyer fired chaff and flares. Countermeasures blossomed, and a missile detonated harmlessly in the wake. Below deck, the MCO-45 Mod 4 naval guns spun up. A 35-pound shell crossed the horizon and struck a lead smuggler boat amidships. The impact turned hull and crew into a spray of timber and water. The phalanx CIWS rotated and hummed. The system designed to eat cruise missiles now spat 20mm tungsten into a 30-foot speedboat until it ceased to exist. The air smelled of cordite and melted composite. Up high, two P-8A Poseidon patrol aircraft circled and fed targeting to the Aegis system. The Poseidon and APY Charter-10 radar traced heat from outboards at remarkable range and laid a targeting grid as precise as a laser. Two MQ-9 Reaper drones held high, eyes open, recording every wake, every jitter, every attempt to flee. Each drone carried AGM-114 Hellfire capability, but rules and restraint held them back. The mission remained capture and evidence, not annihilation. The Navy wanted prisoners and paper trails, not pyres. By 6:00 a.m., the fight had fractured but not ended. 6 cartel boats lay disabled and drifting. 2 burned and were losing buoyancy. Several others limped seaward, wakes jagged and directionless. The operations room tallied numbers that felt both clinical and obscene. 22 separate threats tracked, 14 firing solutions computed, 9 neutralized through a mix of kinetic and non-kinetic measures. 1 Seahawk sustained rotor damage and limped back to the deck. No friendly deaths, no friendly fire, technically clean, emotionally raw. The sea itself showed the cost. More than 80,000 gallons of diesel and marine fuel slicked the surface. Burned hulls bobbed like black flotsam. Bundles of contraband and broken pallets drifted across miles and would be a chain of evidence for courts. The visual was brutal and ordinary at once. It looked like the aftermath of a highway pileup, but stretched across an ocean. Containers of misery floating like trash along a shoreline that belonged to no one and everyone. And yet the engagement was unresolved. A semi-submersible remained semi-submerged and drifting at the edge of the engagement zone, hull low and pumps struggling. A shadow on the thermal feed suggested a mothership still afloat and intact 30 miles to the south. More disturbing was chatter intercepted by SIGINT, indicating a secondary convoy changing course and cutting toward a maritime choke point 2 hours away. The cartels were not broken. They were adapting. They were sending reinforcements. On the bridge, the commander watched screens as if reading a map of future battles. The radio crackled with updates. Boarding teams were placed on alert. Medical teams prepped casualty protocols. Evidence teams prepared seals and tags. The rules of engagement remained engraved in every action. Each boarding had to be lawful, documented, defensible in court. Each seizure had to survive international scrutiny. Yet law and logistics ran headlong into urgency. Survivors in the water signaled with improvised flares. One semi-submersible transmitted a weak distress ping. The ping carried coordinates and a signature that suggested a captain alive and breathing. The voice of a cutter over the net reported smoke on the horizon, and a small life raft spotted 10 nautical miles down. The scene was messy, human, immediate. The battlefield had become a recovery zone and a courtroom all at once. The destroyer did not lower its guard. Sensors remained fixed. The Aegis array continued to scan for returning missiles or concealed threats. Reaper feeds stayed live. Seahawks circled low, rotor wash stirring the slick into new patterns. The Navy was split between 2 demands. It had to press the tactical advantage and prevent escape corridors. It also had to secure evidence and rescue survivors. Those imperatives collided on the deck and in the mind. As dawn stretched, the commander made the call that would bind the 2 phases of this campaign. Prepare boarding teams, arm the law enforcement detachments, mark every bale, treat the wounded, hold position and deny egress, move to recover what can be proved. The fight would not end in fireworks. It would end in boots on deck and paper and file folders. It would end in interrogations and indictments rather than headlines about clean victories. But even as teams readied, new contacts embossed the radar screen like nails on a tomb. Wakes converged on a narrow passage. Reinforcements were closer than the intelligence had predicted. The smoke from burning hulls blurred the horizon and hid movement. The battle had paused but not quit. It had opened a door into a more dangerous phase. The Navy had caught the Armada in the net, but the net had holes. A cutter voice came over the net with a single clipped update. A faint distress beacon pulsed from a semi-submersible 20 nautical miles south, but an unidentified fast mover was bearing down from the east at speed. The commander ordered boarding teams to stand by and hold fire unless fired upon. The deck crews tightened harnesses. Night vision and thermal gear were checked. The recovery boats warmed engines. The story would move from guns to grapples and from explosions to evidence. The engagement had not closed. The ocean still held secrets, and the Navy still held its breath. How do you weigh the cost of stopping a fleet when the next wave may come armed to the teeth? When survival and justice are both on the line, which do you choose and why? At exactly 6:42 a.m., the final phase began. The sea was still burning in patches when RHIBs surged through the smoke. MH-60R Seahawks hovered low, rotors carving white rings into the slick. Boarding teams dropped fast, boots hitting steel wet with fuel. The smell of salt, diesel, and cordite mixed into one long breath of exhaustion and victory. On the first mothership, teams advanced room by room, M4 carbines leveled, cameras rolling, every command logged, each bale was photographed, tagged, and lifted to the deck. By 7:05 a.m., more than 1,100 bales had been recovered, a weight of 50,000 pounds, enough to flood entire states with fentanyl and cocaine. Now, 34 cartel operators were detained alive. 2 bodies were pulled from the semi-submersible. 1 survivor found clinging to a broken hatch. The decks of USS Mason turned into evidence lanes. Sailors who once loaded missiles now stacked contraband under floodlights. Every label, every photo, every chain of custody sealed with precision. Above them, P-8A Poseidon aircraft and MQ-9 Reaper drones continued to circle, mapping the aftermath like silent witnesses. By 7:30 a.m., the guns were quiet. The horizon cleared. Fires died. What had started as a chase had ended as the largest maritime seizure in modern history, over $320 million in narcotics erased in a single morning. The ocean, for now, belonged to the Navy. But silence is never victory. Intelligence warned of new convoys forming farther south. The war was pausing, not ending. If one battle can erase $500 million in cartel profit, how far will the next fleet go to recover it? And how long can the sea remain calm before the cycle begins again? At 8:14 a.m., the gunfire stopped and the count began. The numbers came in like a shockwave. 50 crates of cocaine seized, 30 crates of Strover worth $320 million. The decks of the USS and USCGC were shoulder-deep in cargo, the largest maritime seizure in modern history. But the victory was still worth it. Each cargo required guards, logs, and evidence. The sailors who had operated missile systems like Fano had been operating for 3 months from the Sinaloa and Tren de Aragua networks. But new signals were beginning to light up along the Pacific routes. The enemy was learning fast. Overhead, P-8 Poseidon patrol planes scanned the area, their AN/APY-10 radars tracking new waves heading north. Reinforcements from the cartel world are coming, not in ships, but in money, bribes, and revenge. The ocean is calm, but it feels like the silence between thunder. If $500 million in profits from the cartels can evaporate in a single morning, how long before they strike back? And should America consider such retaliation a crime or a war? By 9 o'clock a.m., the Caribbean had gone quiet again. The smoke thinned, the sea flattened, and the warships of the United States Navy stood motionless under the sun. But beneath the calm was a truth that no radar could track. Every bale seized, every engine disabled, every name written into the chain of custody represented more than a battle won. It represented the price of vigilance. This operation wasn't about drugs alone. It was about endurance, law, and the belief that the ocean, once a symbol of freedom, can also become a front line of consequence. The Aegis radars, the P-8 Poseidons, the Seahawks, and the men and women who crew them proved that technology and discipline can turn chaos into order. But they also reminded us that power without purpose is hollow. Real strength lies not in the missiles we fire, but in the choices we make before we pull the trigger. Every victory at sea costs something: fuel, time, insanity. Yet the cost of doing nothing is always greater. The cartels adapt, the seas change, and the cycle continues until someone decides to hold the line. So what do you think this battle teaches us? That security is a burden shared by all, or that peace only lasts as long as someone is willing to defend it? Tell me your thoughts below, and where you are watching from. Your country, your city, your coastline. It all connects to this same ocean. And if you want to follow more real stories from the hidden front lines of modern warfare, make sure you subscribe, because out here, the next wave is always coming.